Exceptional Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' base capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random. Exceptional Radio.
Happy Valentine's Day, Internet. It's, what is today? It's the 35th day of January, and or 45th day of January. And the Senate did exactly what we all expected them to do and not get shit done. There are still kids locked in cages, and that valuable stimulus check still hasn't gone out. And but I think from what I understand, we're still on track to get 100 million vaccinations by day 100. But that's only in the United States. In the rest of the world, they're having supply problems, obviously. So I think the big news is that there's a COVID variant out there that doesn't give a shit about any of the vaccines. And it's already in the United States. So happy, joy. We've made it this far.
Happy birthday, COVID.
Happy birthday, COVID.
Democratic majority in Congress, the ability to have a Democratic majority in the Senate. All we've seen so far are executive actions and a whole lot of talk. That's pretty much what we've seen.
Yeah.
And the variant, I think, were you referring to the South African, what they're calling in the media, the South African variant?
Yeah.
So there's the vaccine, the mRNA vaccine, I believe this is correct information. The mRNA vaccines can cover all of the variants effectively, with exception to that variant. And the J&J vaccine, which is a single shot, has the potential to provide a level of immunization that would decrease the chance of serious hospitalization and serious illness due to that variant. So it's just it's
yeah, but that one's not like ready for. It's not available.
It hasn't been approved. It's not available yet.
Yeah. So all the things that are in the pipeline, aren't going to address this one, the latest. You know, what's interesting is that the Biden administration apparently has demanded that China hand over its information and the WHO information about the initial months of the outbreak. And pretty sure all that information has been available since the beginning of all this on the WHO website, like the entire time.
There's definitely an administrative process that was not engaged at the beginning of all this because of the practices of the previous United States executive governmental administration, and the lack of effectiveness of our legislative structures and legislative bodies.
Oh, I definitely think it was I definitely think it was some reporter who decided to emphasize demand China. And it's because who else are they going to complain about right now?
Yeah, well, China's coming out ahead.
Yeah.
In just about every way. If we really look at it, they've been growing. Their GDP has been growing year over year, at least for the past 5 years. They had double digits for 4 years in a row. They had, I believe, single digits, at least it was reported in Western media, single digits for last year or the year before. and they were able to control their outbreak faster and more effectively and more efficiently than just about any other country. Um, Israel did well as well. There was definitely some stumbling and falling. There's definitely some challenges with public perception of vaccination needs and certain segments of the population that made it difficult to get full coverage, but there have been
Clear. I think most African countries did better than everybody else.
Yeah.
most African countries, yeah.
Did better than everybody else. Like everybody else. For the record.
I think Africa has also had to contend with like Ebola and some other nasty shit in in more recent history, and so they're like culturally more prepared.
But in 2019, all the charts were saying that those countries were the least prepared.
Right.
Yeah,
They had actual charts trying to say that the United States was the most prepared for a pandemic, and what was it? Great Britain was second most prepared.
Meanwhile,
I think,
China was building like 2 to 3 hospitals in every country in Africa that's part of their whole Beltway initiative. Like,
are we really surprised that there are metrics and charts and graphs from probably most likely Western influenced sources and think tanks and metrics generators, where for the past several generations we've had maps that misrepresent the size of Western nations in comparison to Africa? I mean, it's not that far of a reach to really see that there could definitely be some misrepresentation there.
I don't know if I'm reading this right, but it seems like Mauritius has only had 10 deaths from COVID.
Yeah, and Mauritius has a really thriving scientific community, thriving globally recognized biotechnological research community.
Was it Mauritius or Madagascar or one of the other tiny islands between Africa and India that has the fruit drink, that like the super immune system boosting fruit drink that nobody could get enough of, but nobody was getting COVID?
I think that was Madagascar, but that was like only for a short period. Then people started seeing it more, but it's still like way less than America.
Yeah. I tend to think of Mauritius as the kind of place that's like further into the future than we are. You know, if Tokyo is on track to be Blade Runner, and Hong Kong's also on track to be Blade Runner, I think Mauritius is like, you know, one of those intermediate futures in like Cloud Atlas on the way to despotism and dystopia.
It doesn't even sound possible that they've only had 10 deaths.
What's their population?
I think it's over like 1.5 million or something.
I mean, that's like an absurdly low percentage of cases resulting in case
1.
fatality.
Yeah, that's like 2.6.
That's what, 0.000000.
I mean, it's Indianapolis.
Yeah.
And how many, you know?
How's Indiana doing with their all vaccination program or anything like that?
My dad's on schedule to get a vaccine at some point, I think. He mentioned it the other day. He's like in his 70s, I think. 74, 75, 74. Coronavirus. Let's see.
Marion County has had 1,674 deaths from COVID in comparison to Mauritius.
I mean, there's like 1,000 times more deaths in Indiana compared to Mauritius.
And the population of Marion County is 964,000 ish. So there's like 300,000 more people in Mauritius, and they had 1,000 times fewer deaths.
There's been a total of 15,116 deaths in Massachusetts.
Or wait, 100 times. Sorry.
Just for Marion County.
Yeah.
In Massachusetts, 15,116. Total cases, 527,435.
Yeah, because it's like 89,000 total cases in Marion County compared to like 556 total cases in Mauritius, I think it was it. Or 595 total infections in Mauritius.
I mean, Monroe County has 10,104 positive cases and 155 deaths.
Today?
No, that's just like the county distribution. I think that's total.
Monroe?
Yeah. I think it's the grand total for the past year.
I wonder if that's like with people leaving and shit. That seems like super low.
Well, that's just the county distribution from coronavirus.in.gov.
In the county that Boston is a part of, there's been 1,642 deaths.
Got 155 total in Monroe County. Monroe County's not doing that bad. There's some places with big numbers, it looks like.
Yeah, I feel like Monroe County's lying about their numbers for some reason. Those numbers feel fake to me because there's way too many nursing home facilities and like elderly people around here where it's like, yeah, I know the college students and shit are going to offset it, but it's like there's also a ton of old people around here, which is where I'm like, I wonder if they're underreporting.
I hope they're not underreporting. That would mean that everyone's doing their part to stay safe. That's pretty high expectations, actually, now that I think about it. For the number of people that I see walking around with their nose exposed. It's like they went through the trouble of putting on the mask, but then they don't put it on all the way. You know what? These are the people that walked around with pants that didn't fit and no belt. Like, not the sagging for style, but the sagging because they have the wrong size pants and no belt. Don't know how to wear their clothes right. You know, the person everyone's known that person that they saw on their way to class that their button row was like down one set. And so there was just something off about it, but nobody could like figure it out. And then there's the one person who's like, hey, you know, your shirt's messed up. And everyone laughs because they couldn't figure it out. I think that's where we're at.
It's like people who don't put their pull their underwear and their pants up all the way when they get up and walk out the door. So there's something dangling down over the front.
God, I haven't seen that. That must be a dormitory experience.
Yeah. Indiana's population is like 6.7 million, and there's been 651,000 cases. So we've hit 10% infection.
Yeah.
Ish. And that's where I'm like, I feel like we have gone beyond it, but we've hit 10% infection testing is what it seems like. Because that's where I'm like,
wait, what'd you say the population is?
6.7 million.
They've only issued 3.049 million tests or people.
See, that's where
they've tested half the population, and a tenth of the population is, holy crap,
probably actually double the amount of cases and double the amount of deaths, but the tests aren't catching up to it.
Yep, we're still.
That's where I'm like, this is wrong. There's a huge gap here, and it's the testing gap.
Yeah,
that's what we're looking at.
Well, I wonder what the threshold is for people that they test that they say, oh, you're still sick, but you haven't reached the threshold but for viral load, so you don't actually test positive. And then they just say, well, just stay home. And those people stay home for 2 weeks because, you're supposed to. They never get really sick. And then they just kind of go back about their business later because they never got really sick and they weren't counted because they didn't pass the threshold because they got tested too soon.
And I bet there are a ton of those.
At the same time, only half of Indiana's population has been tested. So
a year in, only half the population's been tested. That's fucking insane.
Well, how many people are like, have you been tested?
No, of course not.
I haven't been tested because I'm not going anywhere and I'm not trying to interact with people. But I'm sure that there are other people like us who have done their due diligence to stay home and avoid people as much as possible and, embrace isolation for the opportunities that it presents. I'm sure that there are other people.
Why should I go get a test when there's not even enough for the entire population? Apparently, I'm not in the most at-risk demographic. If I went and got a test, I'd be taking
a risk.
One test that's should be reserved for a more at-risk population.
Yeah. No, I feel kind of feel the same way. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not at risk.
Well, in fact, whenever flu seasons used to hit before COVID, they would ask people in our demographic not to get the flu shot until they made sure that they had all been distributed to the populations, which I'm like, that's the way it should be. So then you see these people going to underrepresented communities and skipping vaccination lines and basically getting vaccinated in a way that they know is wrong. And I think it's hilarious because it's like
stealing from kids and old people.
Right, but so I'm like, I hope that vaccination is the one that doesn't work on the variant, and you get it, and you learn something, you learn a lesson, because that's when I'm looking at those people like they know what they're doing is wrong. They're once again abusing the system and skipping ahead of people who are perpetually not represented or acknowledged by this system, which keeps them in a position to be oppressed and further abused and exploited. So when these people are doing this shit, I'm just looking at it like, okay, yeah, you go get your vaccine. I hope you got the one that's the fucked up variant that's like gonna make you shit like out your eyeballs or something. And it's like, I don't generally wish. Okay, there's a reason that it's called a curse. When you're trying to like invoke universal energy to negatively affect someone, I don't like doing that in general because it also like sort of brings that negative energy on you. But rich people who use the system to exploit wealth disparity, I hope they like piss nothing but blood and like knives and shit. Like, there's all these things where I have no problem wishing harm upon those types of people because again, there's this pseudo moral high ground that society tries to establish where it's like, well, you shouldn't wish harm upon any. No, let's bring that back. Let's reassess this. Is it okay to wish harm upon people? Yeah, of course. You're not doing harm, wishing harm upon people. There's this whole level of like conflating sentiment and emotional investment with action, where then you get people who will then stretch that to say, oh, words are violence. No, words are not fucking violence. No, let's slow that roll too, because there's all these things about. Okay, let's say, use an example that is a very contentious issue. If someone gets misgendered, has violence been inflicted upon that person? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Let's not conflate misgendering someone with inflicting violence upon that person. Has that person been emotionally attacked? Yes. Has that person been um, put in a position where their existence has been put in question of being valid? Yes. Is that the same thing as violence? No. So I think there's a danger when people start to like make these stretches of, oh, your words are violence. Tell that to the people who've been bitten by dogs. You know, again, there's this whole thing where it's not, it's, there's a predisposition to try to make comparisons for the sake of establishing context for people. But a lot of times those things end up going too far in one direction and then undermining both sides of the equation. Because then if someone's trying to say words are violence, that person becomes ridiculous because they undermine their own argument. If you're trying to say, I'm inflicting violence upon you if I misgender you, you undermine your own argument by taking it to the realm of the absurd. So this is why when people do these things and make comparisons in ways that shouldn't be made, it hurts both sides. Because then when people have actually had violence inflicted upon their person, if someone's trying to say, oh, I've had the same exact experience because someone used the wrong word against me, then that person is suddenly distanced and their existence is invalidated because now you've compared violence upon your person to words being directed at a person. And this is where I know people know what I'm talking about and alluding to, but this is why when you abstract it to a certain level, then it becomes clear why things shouldn't be done in a certain way. Because then that comparison, it works both ways. Like, even if you're trying to make a comparison to try to condemn someone, well, then you're still undermining both sides. It still does the same thing. And this is why both Pedro and Gina were wrong. But one person was trying to undermine people and one person was trying to condemn people. It's not the same thing because their intentions were different. And this is where someone who's trying to undermine the experience of the Holocaust is 2 steps away from being a Holocaust denier. And this is like, there's been a major discussion on whether what was said was anti-Semitic or not. And there's this element of like, oh, is it overtly anti-Semitic? No, of course not. It's not overt. There's overt racism and there's latent racism. And what people need to understand is Holocaust deniers, as overt racists, have created coded language that takes that ideology and makes it covert and institutes it with latent racism. So then you have people like David Icke or Ick or however the fuck you say that piece of shit's name, using coded language like reptiles and lizard people for as interchangeable with Jewish people. So then when somebody tries to call him anti-Semitic, he's like, no, I'm talking about lizard people. And then they try to use this coded language as a shield for their now covert racism. So then they can use that to frame it. So then somebody like Pedro Pascal's language can then be made to be compared as if he's saying the same thing, because they have hidden the racist language in a way that then they can absolve themselves of the racism by then saying it's not overt, when clearly, if you understand the history of this language evolution, it's obviously coded covert racism. It's obvious because that's what they did. That's what they do, and that's how they do it. So it's one thing to pretend you don't understand how racist hide their language and code their language, but it's another for people to actually not be familiar with it because they're not listening to minorities or not listening to oppressed peoples. And this is kind of where, you know, you don't have to use racial slur. Like, it doesn't have to be obvious for something to be racist or anti-Semitic in the language if you know the history of the people saying whatever's being said.
You know, during the previous administration, I remember hearing Cheeto talking about globalists a lot, which is interesting to me because that's like that's a slur against it's an anti-Semitic slur against, but it comes from like the 20s or the 30s, I think. It's like really old. It's like my grandparents' generation might have heard that kind of language as
but
kids.
That's how we. It's an anti-Semitic slur.
Oh, exactly.
Exactly how we know.
It was just so interesting though that he was drawing on such an, like, what I would almost consider to be like, you know, almost ancient in the modern parlance.
It is ancient in the modern parlance. All of these coded terms have taken their position in contemporary consciousness because anti-Semitism, in terms of being coded within language, has occurred for hundreds, thousands of years, and has just evolved in that way in conjunction with the prevailing cultural ideologies. So they have to find their place. The people who perpetrate that kind of language have to basically find a place for those terms in their language to continue to have those ideas prevail within the subcultures that they're a part of. It's a way for them to validate themselves.
There's a historical context to it that goes back those epochs as well, because I think what people fail to comprehend, there are some reasons that these stereotypes and associations exist. And it's like one of these elements that, because Americans are not familiar with Islam and they're not really familiar with Judaism, they don't have the context of understanding how these stereotypes could have emerged over time. So when we're looking at like Islam, for the most part, and there may be individual sects that don't observe this, for the most part, usury is outlawed, meaning you can't make money off of monetary transactions or like taking interest or like effectively middleman price gouging. You can't really do that by Islamic law. And most merchants and like banking institutions observe it in a way that they're not going to be able to make money off of taking investment and turning around and investing it in something else, i.e. how mercantilism works. So banks aren't necessarily chapter 2 in the Quran. It's it's like I'm looking at it. That trading is like usury, but trade has been sanctioned and usury forbidden by God. So it's 100% not allowed for them to be doing it in their communities, but it's not illegal for Jewish people or Christians to do that. So there's this element of times when Jewish people were existing in Muslim communities, operating banking systems. Because the Muslims weren't allowed to operate these banking systems, they would pay a tax because they weren't Muslim. So there is an element of they are being oppressed financially for being Jewish, but they are still allowed to operate financially as banking systems. So this thing is happening in the Islamic world at a time when the Christians are, how do I say this?
Actively crusading.
Actively crusading, but financially illiterate en masse in a way that is not the same in the Islamic world, which is why you have the golden age of Islam happening during the dark ages of the Christian world. And a lot of it has to do with access to information at a individual skill level, because then you have guilds and training schools emerging in the Western context that had already been established in the Eastern, if to use that parlance, context. So there's these things happening.
Eastern also includes all of Asia.
Exactly. It's happening. It's already happened in China, and it's already happened in the Islamic world, but it hasn't. And it's happened in India, but it hasn't really yet happened in Europe. And it only starts in Europe in like the 10th and 11th century, and that's when the university guild type structure really starts emerging, because you have examples of it in like Venetian masons and mason workers and things like that. So this is also where the like notion of Masonic secrets comes from, because like the Venetian tile workers would protect how they laid their tiles, and the only way you could learn it is if you join their guild. So there's this element of,
yeah, they would work at night and with boarded up windows so nobody could see what they were doing.
yeah. So this is where all these modern notions of Masonic secrets and things like, secret societies, there is truth and historic proof of these things, but they have been misunderstood and mythicized in a way to then create stories around them to be sold, but also to aggrandize the people involved to give them more influence than they actually have or should have. And this is the same thing with like, the Vatican Library. People are like, oh, the Vatican Library, it's this secret thing. Motherfucker, you can access it on the web. Straight up. If you want to go to look in the Vatican Library, you can go look at it. Of course, there's going to be documents that aren't digitized yet, but they're in the process of digitizing the whole fucking thing. So it's not like, oh, the Vatican Library is just some secret thing that only people who know Latin and attain the highest level of the Catholic Church will ever find out. Like, no, there are all these lay myths that are urban legends around information that then get created, like the Illuminati or Freemasons and all this shit, where it's like, yeah, Freemasons are a club, but it's not secret. You can just go join, and you just have to go through the process. Like, yeah, they got some stupid ass fucking handshake.
I thought the Freemasons were like free of the Mason Guild. Also, they're like their own union as sort of.
Right, yeah. I mean,
it's just an organization.
They're not Masons. It's not the same thing.
Yeah.
They get used interchangeably and correctly, but they're 100% not the same thing.
Yeah.
But again, this is where, it's like people make this shit out as if it's some secret cabal that, you have to be recruited into, and you can't just walk in and ask for like a form or some shit.
The bricklayers control the universe.
Right.
It becomes a matter of convenience also with the coded language to say, based off of who we're trying to shift the blame onto today, this is what this means. These are the people we should be blaming. And
the Masons,
then the masses who are more predisposed to follow those types of lies end up buying into, these are the people we should be blaming, because those are the predominant types of, ghost stories, boogeyman stories that their parents and their grandparents were growing up telling them, or that there was just a prevailing sense of anti this person that was present within their communities growing up and within the groups of people that they primarily associated with throughout their adulthoods. So you have a whole generation of people after generation of people growing up with these ideas about a specific race or a specific creed or a specific gender or anything like that.
Now I'm thinking of Dune as like an allegory for a factory that produces bricks, and there's a management change, and ultimately results in a riot. With the Masons being people who buy bricks, of course, being represented by the Emperor or the Empire itself. It just becomes absurd, actually, trying to think of some kind of global cabal of contractors who are secretly orchestrating the slow rollout of technology to intentionally hinder development of everything so they can make money, of course. I mean, it only works in science fiction. That's the only place that kind of thought process works.
Yeah, it's really hard to coordinate people, and I think it's funny when, the QAnon types overestimate the coordination capacity of like the government or whatever. Like, yeah, they're gonna have this revolt on January 6th, and everybody in each state house is gonna, march into the courtroom, and everybody's gonna go at 12:01. And everybody's going to bang the gavel at the same time, and that's when we shift to a millennium.
They didn't get their gunslinging what were the Constitution protectors? They didn't show up to storm the Capitol and take the congressional representatives. None of the gun-toting people did that, did they? I mean, people showed up with guns, I'm sure, but that wasn't the main focus. People weren't storming.
Representatives of the gun-toting people showed up, but none of them really did anything.
Yeah, I mean, there was
they just kind of ran around yelling.
Yeah, I mean, a few people got shot by like, the sergeant at arms and his team, which are like the most heavily trained anti-terrorist squad imaginable.
Yeah.
And one woman got shot in the neck, I understand, and died.
Yep.
But that was one of the people who's storming the Capitol.
Yeah, they were storming the Capitol and they were trying to get at the vice president.
Without any weapons. It seems so absurd. The more I think about it, it's just, what the a lot of people got duped. I mean, they got bought and sold wholesale for their stupidity. It seems like the worst kind of idea, and yet I don't know. We're still seeing people getting charged with storming the Capitol because their tracking device was on the entire fucking time.
Well, the New York Times released I think it was the New York Times. They released a time-lapse video that showed a map of all of the active apps that started far away from Pennsylvania Avenue, and then you just see like, thousands of green dots making their way to the Capitol building.
They know every fucking phone number. They know who everyone was. There's no question about it. Every one of those people had a fucking giant "Hello, my name is" badge in their pocket, like signaling to the completely segregated, intact network that is Washington, D.C. Like, it's their own fucking communications network. They monitor all traffic inside. They know every fucking keystroke that somebody puts on their phone. They know if somebody swiped shit and then backed it up and said shot, or vice versa.
Just how many rootkits do you think were downloaded that day?
One for every phone that crossed into DC proper.
I've had my cell phone jammed before, so I know that they can do that. So they were just letting people use their shit just to like, oh, you want to post yourself on Instagram? Okay, go ahead, do it.
Right now of all times? Okay. Every one of those phones that has been compromised now with some kind of rootkit will forever be compromised and tracked extra by the government. Like every single one of them.
Well, not just the phone; it's the person who owned the phone.
Well, no.
Now all of it.
But specifically, the rootkit itself would most likely install itself in like some kind of some section of the memory that's allocated to. This is what I am. This is what I do. This is the hardware that's built into my system. It would self-identify, and every time this whole thing was initialized, that thing would go home and be like, "Hey, I'm here." So for the next year, or at least until they get rid of that phone, like and destroy it, it's a registered tracking device, a real registered tracking device. Sucks to be them. How hard would it have been to just stop at a gas station on the way into DC and get a burner phone and just leave a regular phone at home?
Yeah, but this isn't the way these people think. Did we not see like video after video of the way these people were behaving? Like, do we really think these people are capable of that higher level of thinking? These people believe what they believe. These people believe in these conspiracy theories. They believe that Jews have space lasers, okay, that start wildfires, when it's really gender reveal parties from nincompoops that start wildfires.
Yeah.
Yeah, shit like the Jewish space laser, where it's like an underhanded compliment. They're like, these Jewish people, they're so smart and coordinated, and they put lasers in space so accurate they can start a forest fire like a cigarette. Just it's so accurate. But it's like, are you complimenting them or are you insulting them? Like, I'm not, it's like
So wait. There's a Jewish space laser, but the Israeli space program has yet to successfully land on the moon. Meanwhile, China is getting ready to, and UAE or whatever are getting ready to land their Mars rover on Mars. Shouldn't we be really concerned that China has some like sundial laser thing or something like that? They've got a space lens to turn us into ants.
On a QAnon Reddit forum, and this is 100% true because no one lies on the internet. Israel used their space laser, blew up the moon. The moon is gone. China has now been broadcasting a holographic image of the moon. The whole thing is a lie. We are in a bubble. They have blocked out the sun. Bill Gates has blocked out the sun. You heard it here first.
Oh, so simulation theory as a corollary to religion. They believe in some all-powerful entity that has created their simulation. We can't interact with it. We can't see it. We can't know that it actually exists. We can't even see the edge of the simulation because it's so good. It's so realistic. This is New Age religion.
Not only that, the guy who sabotaged the vaccines, I think in Wisconsin it was.
He's a sim theorist?
He believed that the sky was like a facsimile or some sort of construct that prevented us from seeing God.
Well, that's totally a simulation theory. I mean, we all saw the universal emblem on the sky when all the pollution went away during the first month of COVID. So
yes, we all saw it. We also saw that the Hollywood sign was switched to Holly Boob a few weeks ago.
Oh, bless the internet. How did we get so lucky to have such a fantastic source of entertainment?
It is a blessing and a curse.
Yeah. It's true. I wonder how the Mandela Effect crowd is doing right now. I haven't heard much from that microcosm in a while.
I saw someone who now refers to it as the Mandela effect.
The Mandel?
Yeah,
Man,
so bad they don't even know what person they've forgotten in the first place. And yes, this time traveler has made them forget Nelson Mandela's full name, so it's the Mandela effect now. I mean, it's not, obviously they just forgot.
Well, what's interesting is when I search for Mandel effect, the Hong-O Mandel effect is a two-photon interference effect in quantum optics, which was demonstrated in 1987 by 3 physicists from the University of Rochester.
Yeah. This whole, did a time traveler make this word change spelling crowd? Ooh. Yeah.
Nelson Mandel. His
Nelson Mandel.
Well, there is a Mendel, but it's the Mendel syndrome, not the Mendel effect.
There's Gregor Mendel, right?
Yeah.
Mandela brought set.
There's Mendeleev.
Yeah, no. The other Mendel stuff that I see is like genetics. I really don't think that that's what people are thinking either.
No, most certainly not.
So we're getting to the shortening of conspiracy names phase of the conspiracies.
Nelson Mendelssohn was a great composer.
Is there a Mendelus? Nope, no Mendelus.
I'm surprised.
Nelly Mendel, the music producer.
No, I think it's a good sign when the conspiracy names are being shortened by the people that believe in them, because that means that on some fundamental level, the conspiracy is eroding. That's really good. Eventually, that conspiracy will be so it'll be an amorphous blob of ideas that make even less sense, and it'll be even easier to discount.
Yeah, I have seen a lot less Illuminati talk in the last few years. Like, even among the QAnon crowd, that's the most likely group that would use that language, they don't even necessarily use that term specifically. So I think there's a lot of shit that is eroding for sure.
It's got to take a considerable amount of energy to keep that up. And these are obviously people that are doing this in their spare time. There might be a few professional conspiracists. Conspiracists. Conspirators. But yeah, there's got to be a few that have found a way to make money doing this, but I think the vast majority of them are just part-timer, weekend warrior, hobbyist conspiracy theorists. And so it's tough. They can't compete with the big media. And even the self financed forums are slowly failing, unless they've got that model, that advertising dollar model. And very few seem to do that right. There are only a few forums that I've been to in the last few years that really nailed it. And I'm not talking about Facebook at this point. Facebook is like beyond successful as far as a forum is concerned. But like the real, like user-focused specialty forums, they last, but Facebook is just absorbing all of those users, which is kind of sad, because as nice as the interface of FaceSpace is, it's not quite the same as a finely tuned forum that's indexed and searchable.
Well, not only that, you get all the poison and vitriol on Facebook.
Well, that's existed in the forum universe since the dawn of the internet. Well, the internet forum. But with Facebook, it's got pictures of people. It's more maddening, I think. That's tough, though, because It's it's where everyone's hanging out already. It's hard to find a new forum when the most basic surface level answers that could be had just scouring the internet for 30 seconds. You can find them quick search on Google, but they get answered on Facebook by the gallery, and that's enough for most people. And if 12 random people that you've never met or even talked to on the internet all say the same thing, well, it must be true. Instead of trusting one's intuition and research ability to find the answers themselves.
How's that for simulation theory?
That's got to be the real simulation right there.
12 people that you don't know coming together and creating a reality which you inherently and innately accept. That just sucks.
Doesn't even have to be a simulation. It can be real, and it still sucks. Sucks even more, actually, but it still sucks. In both ideas, that's just terrible. I don't want my world to be
discouraging.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we get into a weird place in trying to break these things down, because then it's like
It goes into this weird limbo.
Yeah.
I'm not naturally conspiratorial about these things, so I only react to what I see, and it's just so absurd to me. You can only really talk about what's absurd for so long. I get that.
Or how the notion that you can be informed about something that's simultaneously supposed to be a secret without leaving the comfort of your own home. Like, it's obviously a contradictory.
Yeah, and of course the secrets are they're not easy to come by.
You got to know the right forum.
You got to look for the right thread.
Pull the right string.
Cherry pick the right facts.
Yeah, but now you got to get a cherry picker.
Everybody's born with a cherry picker. Or they're given one when they come of age.
Man, I was not in line for the cherry picker. Mine must be fucked up. I just got a basket of information. What do I do with it? Got to go through the whole damn thing, right? A cornucopia.
Got a veritable cornucopia.
Yeah. Isn't that what the internet's supposed to be? A cornucopia of information and ideas? Maybe we just need to blend it all up and turn it into one big shake.
Contents under pressure.
So recently I got a modeling amplifier, a guitar amplifier, and it's supposed to emulate various circuit topologies. I've got several of these actually now, but I got a new addition to it. And it emulates different circuit topologies and power section topologies. And it occurred to me that I've been interested in guitar amplifier modeling, the signal chain modeling, for a long time, since I was a teenager. And I noticed that there's always the one thing that prevents the modeling from being widely accepted by, I guess, gatekeepers on forums. And it's that, they just don't sound right. And of course, people always say, if you spend enough time with these devices, you can make them work and you can get them to have good results. And I agree. I think that sometimes they suck and sometimes they're great, but they, like any tool, you have to know how to use them. And I think that, it's interesting because I read about modeling in terms of behavior, like a person's behavior is being modeled by another individual. Parents model behavior for kids, but also we model behavior for each other. And then I think about other things that are modeled that aren't behaviors, or they're actually more complex, like geological modeling and I'm reminded that, like, well, some things just don't work in the models because we don't have enough computing power, or the models are incomplete. They're lacking in some other attribute that we haven't discovered yet. They'll add clarity. Like even physical models of the universe, they're still looking for that, that one component that resolves all of it. I'm not even sure if it exists or can exist, or even have the technology to perceive what those things would even be yet. So I always wonder.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, so I always wonder. It's like, how much of the modeling, or even if we were modeling our reality, how much of it could we actually get right? And in that case, what kind of supreme being do we have to imagine, or advanced intellect do we have to imagine that can figure out how to actually model reality, and for enough people to make it interesting, and so that people don't question their existence too much and don't go all like early version of the Matrix and freak the fuck out and start killing things, or be too compliant and just go to sleep and not wake up. How do we, that's a huge fucking leap. That's like jumping Megalodon.
Well, the big question is how is that conceptualized?
Well, that's what I mean. Like, I think the simulation theory in itself is, I guess I just don't understand enough of it for it to make sense, because
Can it be storyboarded?
It's just like once you start to actually analyze it, it makes no sense.
Makes even less sense.
It makes even less sense. Even less. It's just God appearing as if it's like scientific framing, but it's not, and it's 100% just magic God. Like, once again,
magic God science.
Yep. It's magic God science for people who don't want to go to church and want to appear as if they are scientific and read reports and analysis and market trends and
digitization.
We know statistics. This is simulation, and again, it's the people. I don't know. I guess I look at this is one of the reasons I think money is hilarious, because you have people who openly believe in this type of shit having a shitload of money. And then it's like, oh, this is not anything that you need to be like exceptionally intelligent to do. You just kind of sometimes get lucky. And sometimes your parents are diamond miners
from South Africa.
Yeah, it's like.
Or, what really gets me is that some of the people who really get into the simulation theory and have lots of money invest it in Bitcoin, which is just diverting any potential processing power of the simulation universe away from the simulation universe into rendering a digital currency which only exists in this theoretical computer inside the other simulation. So it gets even better. Not only are we stupid enough to think that a simulation is real, but there's a significant number of us who are stupid enough and have enough money to take away processing power. No wonder our fucking environment's collapsing. No wonder we're suffering from like unimaginable pandemic and diseases and cancer and other horrible shit, because dumb motherfuckers keep diverting processing power so they can make fake money in their gambling machine.
I have this worldwide supercomputer. What should I do with it? How can I make money?
Arbitrage.
I'm going to turn into a slot machine. Quantum slot machine.
We drift closer and closer to being Ferengi every goddamn day. I have a fucking supercomputer that's using more energy than, what is it, like Argentina or some shit now?
Argentina or the Netherlands or I think Belgium too, which happens to be the most well-lit country in the world. Like every meter of street has street light. I think they use more electricity to mine Bitcoin every year than Belgium, or a group of nations. There are probably several like South African nations that don't use as much electricity, like combined. That shit's insane.
For sure.
And then the people who are complaining about green energy, it's not green, it's not sustainable, but then blaming Bitcoin. You tweeted about this, and I thought it was perfect because I think we were all thinking it.
Yeah, because again, it's like people will say shit like, "Oh, a commercial Bitcoin miner uses 3,500 watts on an individual machine." It's like, yeah, of course, if you point at the most energy intensive machine to then say, "Oh, how many solar panels would it take to power that one miner?" It's like, yeah, it would be disproportionate because that's the most extreme example of where advancing the efficiency of solar panels has not caught up with producing at a commercial level. So yeah, there's gaps where because of the lack of investment in green energy, it's going to be really difficult to get one 3,500 watt machine powered using green energy. But that's not because that machine is inherently bad. It's because there hasn't been investment in green energy to scale up for things like machines.
I wonder if Starlink is going to have a like Bitcoin ASIC machine built into it, because they can run off of solar energy, right? Maybe those things are going to be mining Bitcoins now.
Yeah, if they have CPUs, they can anyway, but it's like, they probably do.
Fucking Elon's putting mining machines into space. That's actually pretty genius.
I think somebody already did.
Yeah.
I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but on the scale of Starlink?
Yeah. Interplanetary file system. I'm fairly positive they have some shit in space already.
That's where the Bitcoin mining machines need to be, in space. I mean, once they hit ROI after 10 years of floating around and mining nonstop, they start actually making real money. That seems like a win-win situation. Fuck, get the launch paid for by some communications company that wants to use a satellite for something else. Load the sky up with more junk that mines fake coins. Get them directly powered by the sun. Suncoin. Ooh. Suncoin. No need to make a sacrifice with Suncoin.
It'd be called Soul.
Soulcoin?
Soul coin.
The sacrifice-free cryptocurrency.
There's definitely been people who have launched Bitcoin and other kinds of miners into space using balloons. Like a bunch of them.
Space balloon mining. Well, that just sounds really adventurous.
The pioneers of space balloon mining.
Yeah, who'd have thought that the whole steampunk space travel by balloon thing would actually materialize?
Yeah, I'm like, it's funny to look at money as a motivating goal for people to then be like, oh, how can we go to Mars and make money? How can we go to a different solar system and make money? It's like the weirdest way to approach society, and that's kind of where, again, these people that are so obsessed with profit as a motive for
it feeds cancer tourism, which supports the pharmaceutical and healthcare industries. Because if you go to Mars or even the moon, you're going to become so irradiated on that weekend that you go that you're going to come back and you're going to get fucking cancer at some point, which ensures that, several people down the line will have jobs because they're going to have to care for that person's cancerous ass because they decided to go into space. Or they died and their family got some kind of benefits package because, daddy went into space to mine the moon and he died, but now we've got this fancy house and this big ass truck. We should be mining that stuff with machines anyways, if that's what's going to happen. They don't really need to have humans on site except when shit goes wrong. If we can build a robot to go and live on Mars for 10 years and well beyond the mission parameters, then we can build a machine that can dig a hole and gather material on the fucking moon. It shouldn't be that hard. The moon's made of the same stuff as the Earth. We know it's a known quantity. It's not like Mars where we send our multi-million-dollar drill and it gets stuck like 3 inches under the surface because whoops, nobody realized that Mars was going to have such dense material on its surface. What's interesting is that we still have, the Space Force is still happening. I think Space Force had to have been a thing long before the previous administration.
Oh, yeah, it was.
And so they were just waiting for the time to push forward, right?
I mean, the whole renaming of it and acting like it was a new thing was absurd in the first place. Because it existed under the Air Force years.
Yeah.
So people in the conspiracy world just finding out about it as if it was a new thing showed how disconnected they were from reality. And that, again, it's like, this stuff isn't hidden information. Yes, you just do enough research.
Another ploy to sell tactical gear?
Kind of. I mean, that's kind of what it became. And this is what they started selling commemorative coins and shit like that. I mean, yeah, it was kind of a marketing push.
It's a new cosplay tactical equipment. Great.
Basically. Even down to people kept criticizing them for like not having uniforms that would reflect being in outer space, and they're like, why are you using regular camo? As if these people aren't training on Earth most of the time. Shouldn't your camo have stars on it?
Oh god. I can see you. Your camo sucks. Well, if that were the case, they would be looking for people with the absolute darkest skin pigmentation. Let's be real here. They'd be if it was really about blending in, they wouldn't be sending Timmy from Nebraska into the Middle East. They would be looking for somebody who looks like they're local or somebody who could fit in. If they really wanted to have any kind of real, like, meaningful presence, it wouldn't be foreign invaders or the empire. It would be people from their community working towards creating or fostering a better environment. And I understand on some level that's what they try to promote as accomplishing, but I keep seeing these memes, these pictures of 18-year-old dudes who just signed up for the military, and they're going to be shipped off to a place where there's been an armed conflict for longer than they've been alive. And it's like a new face. Every week we see a different face of some teenager who is going to go off and maybe get to shoot at the Taliban, or maybe get to shoot at someone, some Kurd or some Syrian or some whatever, some member of ISIS. I mean, realistically, this stuff was going on before I was born, so it's not like that's a new thing. But we didn't have memes when I was, 18. We had to wait for magazines to get published once a month.
feel like people have forgotten that Rambo worked with the Afghani people in
Yeah.
the Rambo film.
He did. He worked with locals in every one of the movies.
No, in that the recent one, I still haven't watched it. I'm probably not going to. He's
the
like,
cartel.
yeah, exactly. Because he's like, now it seems like they made it a right wing message, but the original Rambo series was anti-war at the core. It was highlighting racist institutions. It was highlighting problems with police. There's all these things. It was highlighting classism.
Yep.
There's like all these things that it was bringing to light that then got lost on what seems to be the story of the modern version, where it's like, oh yeah, all people remember is Rambo and his machine gun, which is the exact opposite of what you're meant to remember.
Rambo only had the machine gun for a few seconds in any of his movies. He mostly used a Bowie knife and a fucking crossbow, or a bow and arrow.
To be silent.
Yeah, the dude was a ninja.
Well, and using in the first movie when he shot the dude on the ceiling.
Yeah.
It wasn't that same machine gun, but it was, or maybe it was. I forget, but I know it was a machine gun because he shot him through the ceiling, and that's where, again, he only used a machine gun a few times in the actual series.
Yeah. Well, it won't ruin the movie for you if you're not going to watch it. Apparently, in his retirement at his ranch in New Mexico or Texas or wherever the fuck it is, it's on the border, he managed to dig a tunnel system that an adult can stand up in, not just stand, but run through it at high speed while holding firearms. You can run through this thing, and this is a tunnel system maze. Like, there's enough space inside this that he can set traps, booby traps, and avoid them, of course, but people walk into them all the time. And it doesn't collapse despite all of the small arms fire and explosions. And, like, it's just the kind of thing that just, I mean, the end of it becomes a comic book.
It's Home Alone Rambo.
Yeah, it's Home Alone Rambo. It really is. That just nailed it. It's Home Alone Rambo, and he has to take on the cartel, which is somehow what Joe Pesci and what is it? The other guy's name? Daniel Stern. Those guys are really funny. They took a serious beating, but not like the guys in this Rambo movie where he's like shooting him, pinning him to doors with his arrows and throwing knives at him. And, I think Rambo became just, let's see, what was it? Rambo 4 is where he had to save the researchers in Southeast Asia. And that would have been a good ending to the whole franchise, because it put him back in a violent place that he had to save people and all this other stuff. And he's standing up for the little guy, the oppressed imperialist somehow. And, he goes home. They could have ended the whole saga there. He finally goes home and stays home. Instead, they've got to tie it into this whole, like, tries to build a family, but it gets taken away from him. So now he's got to go down to Mexico and kick some ass. Well, that's Taken. That's a Liam Neeson movie that we've seen like 3 of at this point.
Or Punisher.
4. This is the Punisher. Yeah. That's an entire story universe that just, haven't we had enough of that? I mean, eventually they all become the Terminator.
And again, it's like he made it home. He went to the road that he went to the driveway in the first movie.
Yep.
And the third one, he finally walks down the driveway, and it's like, that's where that story's supposed to end.
Yep.
For it to hold meaning. Dragging it and opening that door, it ruins that story.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, again, it's like, he made it home. Rambo made it home finally. We already saw that. Dragging him out of that, it shits on everything he just went through, because then it's like, oh no, he didn't actually make it home. He's got to go back out in the field. He's got to go. He's got to. There's not another person ever like him. So he's the one that's got to do the job. So I don't know.
Making that movie makes jobs, though.
It's true.
True.
But they could have done a Creed on it and made a different story set in the Rambo universe. It wouldn't even have to involve Rambo. They could have just had Rambo as this old guy who lives in town that nobody messes with, that he only shows up at the last minute to, like, you know, get out and do some kind of weird, like, broken jaw Rambo voiced thing. Gran Torino, yeah. There's a way to do that in a different story universe. They could have told somebody else's story. I'm just tired of these. I'm really tired of stories that are being just reiterations of the same movie that I've seen several times since I was a kid. I'd rather just watch the original movie at that point. Recently, I watched a movie called Space Sweepers. It's a South Korean film. It's a live action anime, and it's about a bunch of people who are on a garbage scow and just like fly around picking up trash and salvaging what they can, and then they take it in, they sell it, and get their money. You know, there's backstory. It's fun. The thing that I liked the most about it was visually, it's just stunning. Every moment of it is just like, man, they really put a lot of effort into creating this visual narrative. And I mean, I think it's pinnacle is the robot that throws a harpoon at objects in space, and during like the epic space battle is hurtling through space, grabbing a hold of other ships with its harpoon and destroying them. That's the most anime moment in the movie, and it's beautiful. It's one of those like, man, they pulled out all the stops for this one, and it reminded me of like Wandering Earth and some of the other movies that I would consider to be like live action anime. There are a lot of movies coming out of Asia that I don't recognize the main plot as something that I've seen over and over again, like at least not till the end once it's revealed. And at that point, I don't care because I've already almost watched the whole thing. But there are a lot of movies that are foreign that I just am really getting into. My dad's always recommending some Japanese film noir because there were a lot of old Yakuza boss and gangster movies out of Japan. And the beauty of it is it's in a different language, so you have to pay attention to get it. And sometimes the subtitles are the imagery is so high contrast that the subtitles disappear into the foreground of the scene. And so you really have to pay attention because no amount of rewinding or pausing is going to allow you to see that subtitle. Because these are transfers from old film stocks that probably don't exist anymore. That stuff is actually really interesting.
Yeah, I just looked at that Space Sweepers trailer. That looks awesome as fuck. I hadn't even heard of it.
Dude, so, it's incredible. Like, gorgeous. They've raised my expectations for Asian sci-fi.
Yeah, because then, this is, I don't know what kind of budget they were working with, but this looks like any big budget film as good as it could possibly look. All the lighting and all that shit.
It looks so good. Every bit of it is top notch.
Yeah.
Like that,
I mean, in some cases, this is looking better than WandaVision's CGI.
Yeah, I was actually just gonna say it's giving MCU a run for its money.
100%. Like I think this is on par with their big budget productions.
Yeah.
As far as like Avengers and.
Oh yeah, definitely. Oh, during the space battles, there is a high level of detail at the edges of the screen.
Yeah.
Like,
it's funny you say that because I think that is ultimately what is then determining the differences between big budget films and TV anymore. Because then you look at something like Discovery, and they are almost this detailed with their screens, but it's just slightly less detailed.
Yeah.
in that you can tell they don't have as big of a budget to work with per episode, because then it's like, it's the same shit with the Abrams Star Wars films compared to Discovery. If you look at the shit at the edge of the average shot, there's going to just be way more information packed into the screen in the big budget film than in the TV show. And that's kind of where, again, it's not even just about the ratio, the perspective ratio, but it's about how they actually use the screen and fill it with information. And that a lot of TV is just talking heads, and it's like so zoomed in on the head, you don't even see a lot of shit in the background in TV a lot of times.
No, that's very true. That's one of the hallmarks of the big screen, is that it has so much space to fill. Years ago, the movie Troy with Brad Pitt. I saw that in a theater, and I remember, because I was sitting pretty close to the front of the theater, I remember looking at the walls of Troy during one of the scenes, and I remember seeing detail in the wall, like surface detail. And then years later, I watch it again and at 1080p or whatever, and all that detail is still there. It wasn't lost in translation, and it was really cool because that's the kind of thing that's hard to get. It's a desert scene. There's nothing there except really bright stone and sunbathed stone, and that they're managing to capture details in it. And I think that's the kind of thing that in television production, when they have a constrained viewing space, they don't even plan for that kind of thing. And it's not until we get stuff like Raised by Wolves, where it's being produced by a cinematographer whose whole career is about big scenescapes, and so he's able to make that translate. But that's like a different type of visual storytelling, I think. I don't think that. I think that it's obvious, it's very much at home on the big screen, but it wasn't really until recently that big screens were easily attainable. I mean, I can go to the store now and get a gigantic, near room filling screen for less than $1,000.
Right. Yeah, and that totally changes how TV producers have to approach their media.
Yeah. Like during principal filming of The Hobbit, I think I remember seeing pictures of Peter Jackson using gigantic TVs for his playback monitors because everyone was tired of looking at tiny screens. Like, why the hell not?
They tried to push 3D on us yet again. Destined to be such a failure from the onset. But I was working at Best Buy, and I just remember when they're trying to sell a television where you're going to have to put on glasses, I'm just like, this is not going to work. This is not going to work.
Especially active ones that you have to put batteries in.
Hey, yeah, nobody wants to do that just to watch TV when most of the shit isn't in 3D anyway. No, it was such a... Hollywood... Or I don't know who was trying to force that, but somebody was trying to force that real bad, and it failed miserably.
Well, James Cameron did a big push on it with Avatar.
Yep, they were trying to. This is the future of film. Everything's gonna be this way from here on out. No, the fuck it's not.
No. When the first scene in Avatar, when he waves his gun over the audience, the first thing that I thought was like, yep, and this is as far as it'll go. Some asshole's going to get a hold of this technology and they're going to make some giant dick porn, and and that's where this technology is going to go. People want to see some naked humans jump out of the screen at them. That's it.
Where it went, but
it didn't go there.
I mean, it did though in VR, but that's where again it's like,
yeah,
that's
VR's a better 3D environment than a 3D flat screen.
People aren't using it, but people still aren't using it. And when they are, it's for fucking porn.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. Like, this whole people want 2 dimensions because that's novel. 3 dimensions isn't novel. So when you try to make something 3 dimensional, it feels novel coming from 2 dimensions, but it's no longer novel because we're used to 3 dimensions. So there's an actual paradox in trying to reproduce 3 dimensional experiences for people
Yeah.
that then the developers and the people in the boardrooms don't understand because all they care about is money and they don't care about the actual experience. So, you know, I still haven't seen Avatar because I don't care about 3D shit like in that way. A film is not going to be more attractive to me if it's 3D. Like if I can watch a film, what was it? Not Serious Sam. It was
Hardcore Henry.
Hardcore Henry. That makes sense to make that 3 dimensional. If the perspective is meant to be from the person experiencing the event and that's why you're making it 3D, okay, I get it. I'm still not going to watch Hardcore Henry because I'm not interested in that. Like, I don't know anybody who's actually interested in that. And it's one of these square peg and round hole novelty technologies that, again, I think obviously if more people were interested in it would have caught on. It's not that the shit is not good. It's just there's a reason screens are interesting, and I think it's in that we are used to 3 dimensions, and when something's presented in a 2 dimensional moving framework, it's interesting, and it becomes like interesting enough that we'll dedicate hours of just looking at those things.
Well, it's a story. It's a succinct story that's being told, and you're supposed to look at certain things. And I think that the dilemma with an environment that you can actually interact with a little bit and look around, it means that now there have to be objects in those spaces to interact with and look at. Otherwise, it's just now you're sitting in the position of the camera in a soundstage that people are acting in, or it's a game. If it's a game, are first-person shooters in virtual reality environments taking off?
I mean,
not the way that like Call of Duty did or Crisis.
No, not nearly the way that Call of Duty does, and that's why again it's completely different things happening. First-person shooter is actually 2 dimensions.
Yeah,
even though it's representing 3 dimensions, it's still 2 dimensions. So it's like, again, when people are framing this as if we want gaming experiences in 3 dimensions, well, if that were true, more people would play paintball. But it's a super niche thing because actually moving around in 3 dimensions is why people play sports. The people that play sports are moving in 3 dimensions, whereas the people who play video game sports are looking and moving around in 2 dimensions. So there's a whole lot about 2 dimensions that I think is understudied in a way that we've compartmentalized it to children, especially like cartoons are for kids in society's mind, as if because it's a 2-dimensional animated thing, now it's for kids. 3D, we are more torn about because it makes better porn. Like, because 3D animation makes much better porn, adults are much more likely to defend it as being okay for adults without saying that, because then they don't want to admit, oh yeah, breasts jiggle better in 3D than in 2D. Because then it's like, people are so fucking repressed in their capacity to like discuss these things, because then it's like, yeah, they'll talk around that all fucking day as if that's not what they mean. No, cartoons are for kids. Well, you mean just because you can't see tits jiggle in the way that they can in 3D, just say it. And it's like the same thing where
those are people that are unaware of hentai.
I mean, even I don't even know if they're necessarily unaware, in that, like, yeah, hentai is just never going to compare to 3D.
Nope.
Sorry, it's just not, because you can represent more information in 3D. So inherently,
3D hentai
presentation is going to be, yeah, of course. That's what I'm saying. 3D is going to be better.
In 2016, there was the experimental return of 4D. They had Batman versus Superman at a new theater in New York City, new at the time, and it had artificial wind and rain, moving seats, smoke, smells.
Who wants that shit?
But can you like imagine that experience for like any other kind of movie?
Glory.
Anything in medieval times.
Oh God, it would smell so awful.
Anything with the plague.
Anything set in like a bad neighborhood in San Francisco or New York. Oh, you mean piss smell? We got to deal with that? Yeah, I don't think so. And there's all these things. People want the best parts of those. They don't want the worst. So when there's all these elements of, oh yeah, we're gonna make it snow inside. I don't want that. The whole reason I came inside is to get out of the fucking snow. So when you bring the snow inside, all of a sudden, now I'm questioning why I'm here. So there's all these things about elevating the experience and reproducing the real world. Well, then they take it too far. Then they start to reproduce the negative shit that we came into the theater to escape from. This whole experience is supposed to make not you re-immersing me back into that fucking shitty dystopian world I just came out from.
Imagine Godzilla in 4D.
Oh God. Yeah, they like singe your fucking eyebrows from the heat whenever he breathes fire. Yeah. Or she, I guess, I don't know. I'm assuming Godzilla's a female because there's no fucking gigantic Godzilla dick.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, it lays eggs.
Right? Yeah, Godzilla is a female, so.
Or at least it's it's hermaphroditic at some point.
But yeah, they're not brave enough to actually make Kong a dude on camera.
There was a film in 1958 where attendees were guaranteed $1,000 in compensation if they literally died of fright during the screening. And nobody died.
Of course.
Oh my God. That's a good way to sell a movie, though.
There was another movie where audience members' seats were rigged with electric buzzers.
What the fuck?
Man,
I just think that the whole 4D is terribly flawed. There are just too many ways it can go just sour, really fast. Like extremely fast. Any scene in a bar where people are smoking, just the cigarette smell alone would be like off-putting for most crowds, I think. But then you add the smell of a bar, like the actual smell of a bar, which as we know is piss and outdoors and whatever crap is on people's nasty ass shoes. Like,
and stale beer.
God. Yeah. There's a whole world of smell-o-vision that just never has to happen. We've covered all the reasons why. Most importantly, the Dark Ages. Any of the period pieces that people think they love, watching sword, sandal, and armor, and basically softcore, like that stuff is gonna just smell so god awful. Anything with a dragon in it, I guarantee dragons don't smell like flowers. They smell like singed meat and shit. Flying shit and singed meat.
Where's the dragon gonna take a bath, or why is the dragon gonna?
Dragons don't bathe. They burn that shit off. So they smell like singed, cooked crap and meat. Oh, that's just awful. Fortunately, I'm not into dragons, so I'm not really worried about it.
Yeah, imagine the last half an hour of Game of Thrones in 4D.
Oh, nobody would,
for that matter, I guess.
Nobody would have been able to make it through the first episode if it was in 4D. People would have been puking in their living rooms.
The smell of guts.
Oh man, all those abdomen wounds would be leaking piss and shit. That place smells horrible. There's no, and that's like, imagine in a world before cologne and perfume existed. So they didn't really have much to cover that shit up with.
As if and that's where I'm like, does the cologne and perfume cover it up, or does it just intermix with it?
It just makes it worse.
Oh, really? Yeah. So I don't know, man.
Yeah.
It's like that whole 4D concept was not well thought out. It sounds cool until you think about it, and that's where you see shit like that get developed where people didn't stop for 5 fucking minutes to think, should we actually do this just because we can?
3 Men and a Baby have been a completely different story.
Oh God. Yeah.
Any movie that has a baby in it would be a completely different story.
Right.
Alien.
God, imagine how horrible those things smelled. All acidic, like just being around them, you could probably, it would probably burn your sinuses to be around them.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's one of the few things about that story universe that I'm glad never really got pushed too much into the consciousness. I wonder what those things actually smell like, because they bust out of humans' chests. I'm sure they don't have showers. Anyone who's left meat out for more than, like, if you ever put like meat trimmings in a dumpster and it doesn't get picked up or thrown away in a reasonable amount of time, it starts to smell really horrible, like whoa, horrible. And if it gets to the point that you've got maggots or flies, it's too late. I'm pretty sure that's what an alien smells like, what the xenomorph smells like.
Their blood and shit is acidic, so I'm wondering if they probably smell like sulfur or some shit like that. You know,
Yeah, whatever they dissolve.
Yeah.
It's got to be horrible.
Yeah, it's gonna smell like whatever it dissolves in that, and probably a mix of like some weird ass chemical.
So it smells like broken down protein chains, and
it's not a good smell.
Ugh.
Not at all. It's like smells like decomposition, basically decomposition and like eroding metals, which, you know, rust doesn't smell good.
Rust smells like blood.
Right, exactly.
So blood and protein chains breaking down, decomposing matter and blood. That's what they would smell like.
Yeah,
it would be
weird ass fucking combination of smell.
Oh, so the Space Marines probably wouldn't have been able to make it anywhere close to the reactor. They probably would have had to have some kind of environmental suit to put up with that kind of odor.
And they probably would have been able to smell them
coming. They would have been able to smell them on the way.
That fucking detector. That's the shit where you're like, yeah, you know, you're saying their blood's acidic, or they're acidic, like their spit's acidic and their blood's acidic. They're gonna have some weird ass smells, like, and all that mucus and shit. Yeah, they're gonna smell funky as fuck. It's not gonna be some sterile, inert thing moving through the space.
No,
especially when the environment's meant to be super sterile. Like they're in an environment that is basically sterilized before it goes into one of the most sterile environments in the universe. So it's like
it's the smell of clean encountering the worst dookie that has ever been dropped.
Exactly. So that's also where this whole, you know, I don't think they obviously didn't think about that when they were writing it necessarily, but it's one of these things where you look at it and then it's like, wow, yeah, all of these things together is why we don't want 4D. None of us need to smell the xenomorph.
Oh man.
Or a 50,000-year-old engineer waking up.
Yeah, that
like, shit probably smells fucking gross too, you know? Like,
that thing was ripe too, because he came out and he was like glistening. 50,000 years of sitting in that suit, asleep.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, it's bad enough when you wear a shoe or the same socks for more than a couple days, and you realize how horrible your shoes have been tainted now, that like they'll never not smell like that again. Imagine that spacesuit. We're talking like some like epic level, APOC level foot, athlete's foot at that point.
Yeah. Which, yeah, you know.
Lotrimin for engineers.
Engineers.
Gold Bond talcum powder.
Gold Bond engineering powder.
Gold Bond engineering powder.
Oh, man. Is Gold Bond still a thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
They have Gold Bond like foot cream too, or moisturizer.
You know, it's funny. It's like I'm only familiar with Gold Bond because in high school, I mean, there were commercials on television, but I don't watch television anymore. But I remember seeing, you know, the commercials and thinking like, what is this stuff? And then some of my classmates who did marching band, they had big ass containers of Gold Bond. That's it. I don't think I've ever even used it. I'm aware of what it is, but
I feel like it's mostly punchlines to jokes, right?
yeah, at this point, that's like part of an older generation that isn't part of the information future economy.
Or maybe we just have better foot hygiene than the previous generation, so we don't
we don't have athlete's foot like that.
generation doesn't get as much athlete's foot.
Or wait, what's the other? Jock itch.
Oh God. Oh Jesus. Is that just basically athlete's foot in your crotch?
I think so. What the hell are people doing rubbing their feet on in their crotch? That's like they scratch their feet and then they scratch their balls. That's like these are the same people that don't wash their hands and eat at a public restaurant after using a bathroom.
There's a whole group of people that need a sign to be reminded to wash their hands.
In the men's room, it needs to read, "Bro, you just touched your junk. Wash your damn hands." Or is that too targeted at the bro crowd?
I mean, we know women aren't going to be the ones having the problem with remembering to wash their hands. It's going to be dudes because we're gross. Dudes are gross.
Yeah,
Come on.
dudes are gross.
Because then it's like, we're old enough that we're far removed from a lot of the dude behaviors that like are the worst of the worst.
No, I mean, I remember going into restrooms and thinking like, well, it's a good thing I don't have to shit. Like countless times.
Oh man, yeah. It's just I don't, there's not an easy way for teenage boys to learn about like actual proper hygiene in this country. So a lot of them just flounder and go through up till probably, senior year in college, just having horrible hygiene habits. And that's like fairly common, and I think it's pretty funny because it's also equated with like femininity to actually have good hygiene or being gay. So then there's this incentive to like not actually have too much focus, or you might be a metrosexual. There was that whole thing. Or dudes who actually cared about their appearance deserved an entire
Classification.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, when
metrosexual.
When Metro came out, I remember the corollary was retrosexual. which very quickly transformed into lumbersexual.
Oh yeah, yeah.
which then spawned Amosexual.
I remember
So
that aggression.
yeah, it was.
Exactly how it went down.
I always thought retrosexual. Okay, that's good. We can stop there because that could mean like the 50s when men all wore suits, or some other romanticized era of Americana.
All wore suits and slapped women when they got out of line.
And they always had a drink in their hand
Yes, and a cigarette.
and a cigarette in their mouth. Yeah.
Doctor prescribed cigarette.
That's right. 3 out of 4 doctors smoke Lucky Strikes or whatever their bullshit marketing was.
Valium. Don't forget the Valium.
Oh yeah. Mother's best friend, mother's little helper, the Valium. Well, that was the point of Prince Valium in Spaceballs, right? They're making some commentary about Valium abuse. Prince Valium was always asleep. What a good character.
Oh man, I don't know. Have either of you seen Daredevil?
Which one?
The
Ben Affleck?
one,
The which one?
the Ben Affleck one.
Yes, I've seen it.
Like I rewatched it, and I was looking at it where it's funny to me what people thought of as bad films, whereas now if you go look at it, it's actually a really hard-hitting, controversial topic addressing film that I believe now was only poorly received because they were too spot on addressing the problems that society was not yet ready to address. So it's like if you go look at the Daredevil plot with the timing that it was released and the lack of societal concern for the issues addressed in that film, that explains why the film was not well received to me, which is why now when you go look at the film, it's like, oh, this wasn't actually a bad film.
Wasn't that
Colin Farrell's portrayal of the crazy person?
of was it a Bullseye?
It was fucking amazing.
Yeah, no, that was a really good one.
Yeah, and that's where I'm like, that film got so much hate when it got released. It was like such a failure when it was released. And I'm looking at it, Michael Clark Duncan, fucking Colin Farrell, Ben Affleck, fucking all these people in the same
It
film.
spun off into Elektra. It created a spin-off movie.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that Ben Affleck has portrayed Batman and Daredevil, which kind of occupy similar roles within their respective story universes.
Yeah, I mean, even in Daredevil, there's a point where he's fighting in the like in the pipe organ or on top of the pipe organ, and bats come out like flying out. So there's almost this prophetic moment where you have Batfleck in the Daredevil role, where I'm like, again, all these people who are like, Ben Affleck is the best Batman ever, were probably shitting on Daredevil when it got released, and it's probably the same people who want Batfleck back that hated on Daredevil, and again, it's like really interesting to see how society, like we're just now seeing Justin Timberlake get the repercussions from the Janet Jackson shit, which is hilarious.
Well, 20 years ago, he and Britney Spears got married and divorced within the span of a week or something, right?
Right, which was obviously fake.
And that he's also apologized for that as well. His treatment of Britney Spears, because she's finally back in control of her life, apparently.
Mm-hmm. Janet Jackson's Control album hit -- it's weird. It's weird to see how time loops back on itself, and then again, there's this element of Harvey Weinstein thought that because he got so far, that he had escaped the repercussions of his actions. Clearly, that's not the case. And then, in the same way, Justin Timberlake went so long without any repercussions for the Britney stuff or the Janet Jackson stuff, but it finally caught up with him in a way where you see this stuff happening to all these different people, or like Marilyn Manson. Like, I'm sure Marilyn Manson had no concept of all the shit that he's ever done finally catching up to him, which is why they keep doing that shit. So there's an element of when people do things and they don't see any repercussions, that obviously incentivizes them to keep doing it. But then there's also this element of individuals obviously do this shit because it's a compulsion. But when a bunch of people get caught doing compulsive things, then it looks like, oh, this is a Hollywood group doing it or some shit. So I can see how it would be easy for people to start making these connections that don't exist among these events. But that's also where it's the way that time works. It's like really difficult to make things happen in sequence. If you set up, like, I'm talking about actual dominoes. I'm not talking about a metaphor. I'm talking about actual dominoes. If you set up a line of dominoes, it's almost impossible sometimes to get them all to fall. Sometimes one will stop and then you have to adjust it by a millimeter and then the line will work. And it's like, people think you can just set up a row of dominoes and push the first one and the sequence happens in a row and that's the end of it. That's not how fucking time works. That's not how history works. That's not how events work. That's not even how dominoes work. Dominoes don't even fucking work that way. But
dominoes for domino rallies are actually specially designed. But they're not like the game dominoes that people get in a box of dominoes.
Right, for sure. And again, that's because even those things don't behave the same way every single time. And there's sometimes that they'll fall in different direction. And again, that's why they're designed in a way that's meant to reproduce like the same behavior. But even then, the behaviors change. So it's like, you know, I think it's easier for people in general. I mean, and we can scientifically practice.
That's like modeling the tube amplifier and the nonlinear behavior of a tube once the electrical signal exceeds the designed tolerances of the circuit. Like that's why modeling that whole universe is difficult. Maybe the linear behavior of the dominoes is predictable, but once we go off axis with anything, once it goes beyond the linear framework of the model, it's all up in the air. We can't predict that kind of behavior. Even with the best models, we might miss out on something. There might be a breeze in that part of the room. The dominoes don't want to fall the right way.
Yep, that's exactly it. And it's easier for us to assume that breeze doesn't exist rather than to take into account that breeze might exist and then reduce our confidence in our conclusion, because the perception that a lower confidence in an outcome is somehow indicator of less commitment to the outcome. And obviously that's not valid, but you know, this is where perception has shaped people's interaction with ideas, in that, you know, I think we've addressed it before. It's like, if you perceive that things are better because Joe Biden is now president, then you probably weren't actually affected by Donald Trump in the first place. And this is kind of one of those things where it's hard for people to know when their perception has met reality or when their perception has been shaped by an actor.
You know, maybe that's the reason that science isn't adopted as readily by some people, because nobody wants to put in the time and effort to find out information only to find out that they were wrong.
Right.
Nobody actually likes, people don't actually enjoy that kind of experience. Finding out that you're wrong.
No, people will say that they do. Oh, I love learning new things. I love finding out I'm wrong. No, fuck you don't. Shut up.
No, it sucks, but it's also a good thing, and it's necessary so that people like stop remaining ignorant.
Right, exactly. It's a necessary part of mental growth. But nobody likes being wrong. Anybody that says that is a fucking liar and a half. Because it's emotionally distressing to find out you were wrong about something. That's part of learning you're wrong. We have physiological responses to learning you're wrong, and it doesn't feel good. So again, it's like the idea of, oh, my dopamine drops and I feel great when I learn I'm wrong. Shut up. No, you don't.
I mean, I'm wrong a lot. I find out all the time when I'm reading about something like, oh shit, I misinterpreted that completely, and it sucks. But I would also rather have read that thing and learned something. It's a tough balancing act, I think.
It's not though, in that this is where we have an emotional drive and we have a logical drive. We know logically that it's better to learn you're wrong than to keep working with information that is incorrect to make yourself feel better. That's why when we learn we were wrong, we take on that new information, but we emotionally suffer when we learn we're wrong. Those two things are not in conflict, but because people have a hard time being nuanced, they don't want to act like, oh, if I failed, I didn't actually fail because I learned something from it. Then it's not actually a failure. Like, no, you failed. It's okay. It's okay. Just acknowledge you failed. Yes, you feel like you failed. Embrace that. Accept it. Learn from it. But don't try to erase the failure to make yourself feel better. And then in the process, start to redefine failure. And, you know, there's this whole element of failure being undesirable. So then you have these things of, oh, you can't be a professional or proficient at your thing and still fail, as if, you know, once you reach a certain level of knowledge or proficiency with something, failure is no longer even possible because you put in so many hours. And that's obviously not the way things work. But I think there's also, that is meant to establish a false sense of authoritative hierarchy, which then perpetuates the notion that a certain group of professionals like Elon Musk can never be wrong. And even if Elon, if he tries to land his rocket and the rocket fucking crashes and fails, oh, this wasn't a failure. This was just a learning experience for Starlink. So it's this double-sided language where the people who are allowed and given the opportunities to take risks then never have their risks actually be presented as failures when they fail, and then the people on the other side never be allowed to fail, because then we can never be that person, because we have the potential for failing because we're still plebes down here at the bottom.
Fucking plebeians.
Exceptional Radio.
Exceptional Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random. Exceptional Radio.